The Gila River drifted lazy that morning in the Arizona Territory, 1883, carving its patient path south through the rusty red canyon walls like it had all the time in God's green earth. Caleb Rourke had tracked east along its banks from the home ranch gate right after false dawn. His boots were still heavy with night dew from crossing the yard in the pitch dark, and the coffee in his tin cup had turned stone cold hours ago. He wasn't out here chasing fresh air or watching the sun come up. He was out here because Thunder was gone. The big bay stallion had been safe in the south corral at sundown. Caleb always made that last check, shaking the gate latch, counting every head. 12 horses. But around 4 in the morning, a strange noise yanked him out of thin sleep. And when he lit the lantern and walked the fence line, the count was 11. Gate still fastened tight. No broken rails. No sign of how a horse that size had simply vanished. A brute like Thunder didn't evaporate into thin air. You either picked up his trail or you kissed him goodbye forever. And Caleb Rourke hadn't poured 12 hard years into this spread just to start losing pieces of it now. He picked up the tracks where the creek bank had turned to soft muck after 2 straight nights of rain. Wide, heavy prints, punched deep, marching north straight toward the river. Thunder. No mistaking them. The stallion had always carried himself with a slight roll to the right front, a leftover from a bad stumble as a 2-year-old that never quite healed right. Caleb had sworn a dozen times to get the farrier out for a proper shoeing job. Never quite got around to it. That tiny oversight turned into a blessing now. Pointing the way like a needle on a compass, he followed the sign almost a full mile. Sun just cresting the mesa to the east. The high desert still gripping the night's chill in the shadowed rocks and the pockets between the greasewood and sage. The light slanted low and golden, stretching long black shadows ahead of his boots. He moved fast, not a run, but the steady, no-waste stride of a man who'd walked this country blindfolded and could still find his way home. He heard the river's low growl before he saw it, that steady murmur of water sliding over river stones. Rounding a tight bend through a thick stand of cottonwoods, he pulled up short. Thunder stood belly deep in a quiet eddy the current had scooped out of the near bank. Head low, ears relaxed, perfectly still, not grazing, not sipping, just standing the way a horse stands when he's easy in his skin and with somebody he trusts down to his bones. And he wasn't alone. A young woman stood a couple paces off his shoulder, one hand resting feather-light on the thick crest of his neck. Apache, clear as day from the cut of her deerskin dress, the fine beadwork along the yoke, the way she held herself. Still as carved stone, like quiet wasn't something she practiced, but something she'd been born knowing. She hadn't heard Caleb step through the cottonwoods, or if she had, she gave no sign. Her hand never left the horse. Thunder never flinched. Caleb stayed at the edge of the trees a long beat, just taking it in. Thunder didn't let anybody lay a hand on him. That was the plain truth. Eliza had declared him a one-man horse the day they led him home at 3, green broke and half feral, eyes rolling white. And she hadn't been wrong. He put up with Caleb's touch because he had no choice. He suffered Amos Kearney and the kid Null's hands because they were slow and gentle, but he never liked it. Caleb had seen grown men with plenty of horse sense get teeth in their shirt sleeve, get shouldered hard, get pinned against a rail once so bad the man still walked with a hitch. Thunder wasn't vicious. He was just particular. He decided who mattered. Right now, he wasn't deciding anything. Head slightly dropped, he stood easy in the river, while this stranger touched him like they'd known each other since he was a colt. Caleb stepped clear of the trees. At the first crunch of gravel under his boot, the woman's head snapped around. Quick, exact, the turn of someone who'd been listening the whole time without ever showing it. Dark eyes locked on him, level and unreadable, giving nothing away. Mid-20s maybe, sharp cheekbones, watchful face, gaze that weighed you before it reacted. She didn't back up an inch as he closed the distance. Didn't reach for a knife. Just waited, and in that, waiting was a calm. Caleb recognized somewhere deep, though he couldn't name it right away. The calm of somebody who'd already stared down the worst hand life could deal and decided fear wasn't worth the show. A strip of cloth was bound tight around her left forearm, soaked dark with blood. Caleb stopped a few yards from the water. "That's my horse," he said, voice flat and even, not an accusation, just laying down a fact. She studied him a long moment, then glanced at Thunder, and then back to Caleb. When she spoke, the words hit him like a hammer between the eyes. "I know. His name is Thunder." Caleb didn't breathe. The river kept moving. Cottonwood leaves rustled in the first breath of morning breeze. Thunder blew softly through his nostrils and shifted a hoof. Nobody called that horse Thunder. Caleb had started using the name in his own head when the colt was green. It was Eliza who'd made it real, naming things the way she named everything. Thunderheads rolling across the mesa, the old twisted juniper by the kitchen window, the exact bend in the creek where the late afternoon sun turned the water to molten copper. She'd named the stallion Thunder for the deep, rolling drum of his hooves pounding hardpan when he really opened up, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The name had stayed private, locked inside the four walls of their life together, never written anywhere. After Eliza passed, Caleb hadn't heard it spoken aloud by another living soul. "How do you know that name?" he asked. Her eyes flicked to the bloody bandage on her arm, then back to him. Not dodging, trading. She had something he wanted. She needed something first. "I need water," she said. "Clean water and cloth if you've got it." Caleb looked at the arm. The wrapping was useless now. Soaked through, the bleeding still fresh enough to worry him. He tugged the clean bandana from around his neck. Thank God he'd put on a fresh one that morning, and stepped to the water's edge. She didn't flinch or retreat as he closed the last few feet. That told him plenty. He'd known folks who jumped at every shadow. He'd known others who stood their ground, not because they weren't scared, but because they'd already decided showing it wouldn't change a damn thing. This woman was the second kind. He held out the bandana without a word. She studied it, studied him, then unwound the old cloth one-handed and let him see. Knife cut. Clean, straight, deliberate. Not some accident. Deep enough to have bled hard and long. It needed pressure, clean wrapping, quick. Stitches maybe later, but not out here. "Come to the house," Caleb said. She looked at him the way you look at an offer you never saw coming and aren't sure you believe. "I know you've got no call to trust my word on anything," he went on, "but that arm needs proper tending, and Thunder'll walk easier if I lead him and he can see you're right there with us." He paused. "That horse doesn't hand out trust like candy. He gave it to you. That means something." She held his eyes another long second. Then she spoke words that turned the ground under him solid again. "Your wife used to leave things at the flat rock by the south fork of the creek." Caleb went stone still. "Dried venison," the woman said, "wrapped in cloth, medicine, sometimes roots wrapped in oilskin." She watched him take it in, the words sinking slow and heavy like stones dropped in still water. "For 2 full winters your wife left those packages," she said. "My grandmother was the first to find them. Didn't know who was behind it at first. Then one dawn she went to leave something back, dried herbs, a strip of woven yucca. And from across the creek she spotted your wife in the half-light." The woman's voice stayed steady, low, handling the memory careful as if it might spill. Your wife saw her too." Neither one said a word. Just a single nod passed between them, quiet as a promise. Next time the food came wrapped, there was a tiny blue bead knotted to the cloth. My grandmother kept it safe all these years. Caleb felt the old familiar ache bloom behind his ribs, the same one that greeted him every morning like an old neighbor who never quite left. The way you'd learn to chew on the sore side of your mouth because pulling the bad tooth meant facing the empty space it left behind. He wasn't ready to sit with that emptiness. Not yet. He hadn't known. Not one damn thing about the flat rock, the packages, the bead. But it was pure Eliza. Small, secret kindnesses she gave without fanfare, without needing thanks or even acknowledgement. Patient as the desert itself. Quiet as prayer. That was her in every breath she took. "She died 3 years back," he said, voice rough around the edges. "I know," the woman answered, soft. My grandmother noticed when the gifts stopped coming. She understood why. If this tale's hitting you square in the chest, that deep, real weight of lives that cost blood and heart to build, hit subscribe right now. These are the stories that stick because they belong to folks who poured everything into what they claimed and stood tall when the world tried to shove them off it. Caleb eased Thunder up out of the shallows, the big horse stepping careful onto the gravel bar. The three of them started back toward the ranch in the pale gold of early morning. The man, the stallion, the woman, walking the desert in a silence that felt easy, not strained. On the way, she told him her name was Talia, said she scouted ahead for her band, that they'd been following the ancient corridor north of the Gila on their seasonal rounds, a path worn deep by generations long before any white man drew a line on paper. Then her voice dropped lower. 2 nights ago, just before first light, strangers rode into their camp. Not soldiers, not homesteaders guarding a quarter-section claim. Hired men, hard-eyed, moving quiet and mean. Survey gear stuffed in their saddlebags right next to Winchester carbines. They hit fast, no warning. 2 lay dead before the smoke cleared, an elder who stood his ground to protect the remuda, and a 17-year-old girl caught in the wrong spot at the wrong second. Talia had been down at the creek, a quarter-mile off, when the shooting started. She heard the cracks echo, ran back to find flames licking the wickiups, bodies on the ground, and riders spurring east with stolen horses trailing behind. She tried to stop one, earned a knife across the forearm for her effort. Then she ran, hard and blind, toward the only ground south of the river she figured might still hold safety. The place her grandmother had spoken of, the woman with the oilskin bundles, and the silent nod across the water. By the time they reached the home place, Amos Kearney was already at the main gate, eyes narrowed on the horizon like he'd been searching it since sunup. He flicked a glance at Talia, another at Thunder, one more at Caleb, said not a word. Amos had ridden for Caleb 9 years now. He'd learned the hard way when questions could wait. The kid Null wasn't as seasoned. His mouth opened the second Caleb stepped through the rails. One sharp look from the boss, and it snapped shut fast. Like a man who'd almost stepped on a rattler and caught himself just in time. Kid had good instincts. He just needed miles to sharpen them. Caleb led Talia inside the low adobe house. He stoked the stove, set water to boil, pulled the medicine kit from under the sink. Carbolic wash first, then fresh linen strips, tight binding. She perched on the table edge, arm steady as iron, never flinching once. Her eyes followed his hands close, memorizing every move like she'd need to do it herself someday. "The men who hit your camp," Caleb said while he worked the last knot. "Any idea who sent them?" "I'd seen one before," she answered. "In the settlement south of here. He rides for a man named Hale." Caleb finished the wrap, leaned back against the wall. Victor Hale. Her gaze sharpened like a blade catching light. You know him? Know of him, Caleb said. He looked down at his scarred knuckles, then out the window where Amos had led Thunder to the trough. Showed up 8 months back. Landman out of the East, fronting for money men in Boston or Philadelphia or wherever they count their dollars these days. He paused, jaw tight. Made me 2 offers on this place. Polite as pie both times. I turned him down flat both times. Caleb met her eyes. The quiet ones. The ones who smile while they twist the knife. That's the breed that keeps me up nights. Talia reached inside her dress, came out with a rolled sheet of paper, edges darkened by water but whole. She spread it flat on the table between them. Hand-drawn survey map. Caleb knew the country the instant he saw it. The Gila Valley, the broken canyons north, the creek forks, every grazed acre on both sides. His ranch was boxed in clean black lines. So was the Apache travel corridor farther north. Red ink slashed bold across both. Proposed rail routes. He'd seen maps just like it years ago back in Tennessee, before the war turned everything to ash and memory. I pulled it from his saddlebag, Talia said, when his men rode into our camp. Caleb stared at the red lines cutting straight through his deed, through the old path her people had walked forever, through 3 neighboring outfits he knew by their creek bends. This wasn't guesswork. The survey was done, the decision made. Somebody back east had already declared this valley open for business, and Victor Hale had drawn the short straw to clear the way. He figured you'd refuse, Talia said quiet. That's why they came to us too. We said no. The cabin went dead still. The kind of silence that presses in thick. Caleb rolled the map careful, set it aside. His mind was already running the figures, what this opened, what it shut forever. He wasn't the sort to rattle easy. Panic never fixed a broken fence or paid a feed bill. He was a practical man, plain and simple. Your kin safe? He asked. Talia looked at him a long beat before she answered. In that pause, he read surprise. Not that a decent man would ask, but that he might actually be decent. Another piece sliding into place in her quiet judgment of him. My uncle got the rest headed north, she said. I stayed back. Needed to find what I could. You stayed for the map. Partly. She glanced toward the window, light slanting across the sill. Partly because of the woman at the rock. I had to know if what she'd been, whatever goodness she carried, was still alive here. Caleb let that settle. Pictured Eliza at dawn, setting down a bundle at the flat rock while another woman watched silent from the far bank. No words, just a nod. Something real passing hand to hand without ever being spoken. He thought of the 12 years he'd built this life beside Eliza, the 3 since he'd kept it going alone, and the question that woke with him every morning. What the hell was it all for, if not this? It's still here, he told her. They had till mid-morning before trouble showed. Caleb had been expecting it. Hale's riders would have cut Talia's trail eventually. The river bend was the only sensible place she'd run. He was out in the yard, splitting cedar posts with steady swings, when he heard the hoofbeats, 3 riders coming slow. The careful nonchalance of men pretending they weren't hunting. The lead man had a washed-out face nothing would stick to and a brand-new Stetson perched square and stiff on his head. He rode straight to the gate, eased back in the saddle, and hooked both forearms over the horn like he owned the place. Said he was hunting a runaway horse. Claimed folks had spotted a stray Apache pony drifting through this stretch of the valley. Asked real casual if Caleb had seen anything out of the ordinary. Caleb kept the axe balanced easy in one hand. met the man's gaze with the slow, unhurried patience of a man who had nowhere better to be and all damn day to prove it. "No stray horse come through here," he answered, voice level as a drawn line. The rider's eyes flicked to the corral, scanned the horses standing hip-shot in the shade, then slid back to Caleb. "Mind if we water the stock?" "Trough's around back," Caleb said. "Amos'll point the way." He never took his stare off them while Amos led their mounts to the trough. Never blinked while the horses drank, long swallows breaking the quiet. Those three felt every second of that steady watch, like a cold hand on the back of the neck. Men riding dirty know exactly how it feels when someone sees through the act. They don't like it one bit. Less than 10 minutes later, they mounted up, turned west at that same deliberate walk, pretending nothing had happened. Caleb stayed planted at the fence rail until the dust settled and the horizon swallowed them whole. Then he waited a little longer, just to make sure no one doubled back. Talia stepped out from behind the barn where she'd slipped without a word the instant she heard hooves. She'd chosen her spot on her own, quick and quiet, reading the threat before anyone said a thing. Another mark in the tally of what kind of woman she was. Sharp, self-reliant, always thinking 2 moves ahead. "They'll be back," she said. "Tonight," Caleb answered, "or they'll round up more hands and hit us come morning." He glanced east toward the distant smudge of town on the plain. "Either way, we need to reach Sheriff Tobias Creed before they do." She studied him. "The sheriff," he explained. "One of the few men left in this valley I'd hand that map to and sleep sound afterward." He met her eyes. "It's a solid half day in the saddle. Won't be easy. Folks in town are going to stare." "People stare at me everywhere," Talia said, plain and direct. No anger, no self-pity, just the calm truth of a fact she'd stopped letting surprise her years ago. "Then we ride in 1 hour," Caleb said. "I aim to hit town before the lamps are lit. If this yarn's got you hooked, pulse quickening, leaning in close, go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe. More tales from this hard country are coming, and you don't want to miss a single one." The trail to town stretched 4 long hours through open flats that gave way to jagged canyons and back again. They covered most of it in companionable quiet, the kind that doesn't need filling. Caleb rode Thunder, the big bay moving with that calm, sure-footed authority he'd earned the hard way. Talia took the gray mare he'd nodded toward without fuss. Solid as oak, dependable in rough country because she simply was. They spoke when the path widened enough to ride side by side. Caleb asked about her grandmother. Talia told him about the old woman, 70 winters and still reading the land sharper than anyone she'd ever known. Could look at the slant of afternoon light on the mesa and tell you what weather was 3 days out. Down to the drop. Talia had learned the same way most folks learn a family trade. By being close, watching, doing, soaking it up through years of quiet example instead of schoolroom lessons. It was her grandmother who'd started leaving return gifts at the Flat Rock all those seasons back. Dried sage bundles, finely braided yucca cord, once even a small deer carved from mesquite. "She never gave your wife's name," Talia said. "Just called her the woman with kind hands. That's what she saw, even from across the water." She paused. "Said a person gentle with the land and gentle with animals usually carries that same gentleness for people. It runs straight through a body, the same current." Caleb rode silent a moment, letting the words settle like dust after a wind. "Eliza would have liked your grandmother," he said at last. Talia glanced over, the corner of her mouth lifting just a hair. The faintest dry humor. "She would have liked you too. My grandmother's not easy to impress. You haven't shamed yourself yet today." Caleb felt the ghost of a smile tug at him, unexpected and brief. The settlement called Garrick wasn't big, but it had the stubborn permanence of a place that meant to last. 3 dusty streets across, 4 deep, anchored by a windmill tower, a brick bank, and a general store that handled mail along with everything else. The sheriff's office hunkered at the far end of the main drag, so riding in meant parading the full length under every eye on the boardwalks. Heads turned. Some looked away quick, some didn't. Caleb kept Thunder at a slow walk, gaze locked straight ahead. Talia matched him stride for stride, carrying herself with that same quiet composure he'd noticed earlier, neither rigid nor showy, just completely present, completely closed off, giving no crack for judgment to slip through. A drunk leaning outside the saloon muttered something low and ugly. Caleb chose deafness and rode on past. Sheriff Tobias Creed sat behind his scarred pine desk when they stepped inside. Lean man, late 40s, spectacles shoved up on his forehead, carrying the bone-deep tiredness of a lawman who'd worn the badge honest too long and collected enemies like burrs on a saddle blanket. He looked at Caleb, looked at Talia, looked longest at the survey map Caleb laid flat on the desk. "Where'd this come from?" he asked after a heavy silence. "From their camp," Talia answered. "I took it when his men attacked us." Creed studied her then, properly, the way a careful man weighs a witness, measuring truth against detail. "You can describe the men?" "I can describe all 3, she said. "The one I tangled with is called Mace. Scar under his left ear, missing the tip of the right index finger. He rides for Victor Hale." Creed went quiet, lifted the map, traced the red lines with his eyes, set it down again. "Hale's been hanging around town 4 months now. Got connections at the county seat. Got strings pulling higher than that, I reckon." He met Caleb's gaze. "You know what you're stepping into, bringing this here." "I know he's sent riders onto deeded land," Caleb said. "I know 2 people are dead. I know this map carves a rail line across property nobody sold." He leaned forward just enough. "I've known you 11 years, Tobias. You're not the kind to look the other way." Creed held the look a long beat, then turned to Talia. "The 2 killed in the camp, what were their names?" Something crossed her face. Not raw grief, but the tight-leashed version a person carries when they can't afford to break yet. "Elder Sahu," she said, "and a girl named Pelly, 17. Creed wrote the name slow and deliberate, pen scratching like it carried weight. The sound said what his mouth didn't. He was hearing them, marking them, making it real. "I'll need 2 days, he said. "Gotta wire the federal marshal's office down in Tucson. If what this map points to is real, it's bigger than my badge alone. But I can slap a material witness hold on Hale based on the raid. He won't know the why, not right away." He glanced at the map once more. "This stays locked in here," he said. "If anything happens to me," Talia told him, "it goes with you." Creed nodded once, slow and sure. Agreed. They rode home in the slant of late afternoon sun, the light spilling molten gold and copper across the mesa rims, turning the whole desert to fire and shadow. Caleb watched those long shadows stretch ahead and thought of Eliza. How she'd always pause to drink in light like this, how she'd stop everything just to watch it change. Back when he was forever in a hurry, that habit had chafed him. Now he'd trade a year of his life to see her do it one more time. "You loved her deep," Talia said, not a question. "Yes," Caleb answered. "She is in this land," Talia said. Not soft poetry, but plain truth, the way her people spoke of Earth and the ones who'd walked it, bled on it, returned to it. "My grandmother says folks who truly love the ground they live on, who care for it honest, who stay true. They don't ever really leave. They become part of it, Not quite a ghost in the old stories, but more like a lasting mark. The patient way a stream wears down stone over generations until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Caleb rode quiet for a stretch, the words turning slow in his mind. Your grandmother said that. She says it about damn near everything, Talia answered, a faint wry edge to her voice. Got a gift for boiling the tangled stuff down to plain truth. Drives me up the wall sometimes. This time, Caleb let a real smile break through. Small, quick, but honest. The first one in longer than he cared to count. Drop a comment right now. Do you reckon Caleb did right, wading into this mess for a woman he'd barely met? Where would have you drawn your own line in the dirt? We want to hear it. Trouble rolled in at 3 a.m, right on the nose the way Caleb had figured it would. Not the same soft-footed survey boys this time. These were harder men. The kind you send when the job needs finishing fast, silent, and permanent, under cover of dark. Caleb was already wide awake before their boots touched the north fence line. He hadn't closed his eyes all night. He'd sat in the straight-back chair by the window, Winchester laid across his knees like a promise kept. The posture of a man who'd made up his mind to meet whatever came. Talia was up too. She'd chosen the barn for her post, calm and matter-of-fact, told him straight. If riders hit the ranch, they'd storm the house first. The barn gave better cover to someone who knew how to move without sound. When he'd passed her a rifle earlier, she'd taken it without fuss, worked the lever smooth and sure, checking the action like she'd handled 100 just like it. 4 shadows in total. They didn't bother with the gate. Climbed the north wire instead, which meant they'd scouted the place in daylight, knew every weak spot and blind corner. 2 peeled off toward the house. 2 headed for the barn. Caleb eased to the window, muzzle steady. What came next wasn't some drawn-out gunplay from a dime novel. No slow build, no dramatic stares. Just raw, sudden violence. Short, deafening, terrifying in the way real danger always is. Everything compressing into heartbeats of pure consequence. His first round cracked high over the 2 approaching the house, kicking dirt at the fence line. Warning shot, deliberate. He wanted them stopped cold, and he hit exactly where he aimed. They froze. From the barn, 2 quick reports snapped back. Crisp, measured. One of the barn raiders bolted the way he'd come, boots pounding. The other hit the ground hard, howling, clutching his leg, but very much alive, and hating every second of it. That told Caleb everything he needed to know about Talia's shooting. Precise as the rest of her. The pair at the house fence traded a fast glance, then looked toward the groaning man by the barn. Quick math in their heads. Bad odds, worse prospects. They scrambled back over the wire the way they'd come, spurs jingling frantic in the night. The downed man had caught a clean through and through in the meat of the outer thigh. Caleb hauled him inside, lashed him to a kitchen chair, gave him a tin cup of water, and laid it out plain. You're going to tell me everything Victor Hale sent you here to do, he said, or you'll sit right there till the sheriff hauls you off come daylight. Those are the only 2 doors open to you. The man talked. Spilled it all. Hale's backroom deal with the railroad survey outfit, the kickback to the land office clerk in the county seat. 3 other spreads they'd leaned on before Caleb's, 2 of which folded quiet under threats nobody was supposed to mention. He named names from the camp raid, who gave the green light, mace's full handle, 4 more gun hands in the crew. Amos Kearney wrote every word. Caleb had roused him the second the shooting started. Amos appeared in the doorway, rifle ready. Then, once the dust settled, pulled a pencil stub and scrap paper from his vest like it was the most natural thing in the world. Man had been through enough scrapes to know paper beat memory every time. Caleb had always respected that about him. They sent Null pounding to town for Creed before the sky even lightened. Sheriff Tobias Creed rolled in by mid-morning with 2 deputies and a fresh wire from Tucson. Federal warrant language that carried real teeth. Victor Hale was pulled out of his room at the Garrick Hotel before the noon bell rang. The crooked land office man in the county seat turned in his badge 4 days later. Fastest quit Creed swore he'd seen in 3 decades behind a badge. The prisoner in Caleb's kitchen rode to county lockup with Amos's signed statement tucked in the marshal's saddlebag. Bought the talker a lighter stretch behind bars and bought Hale a much heavier one. The rail line got shoved north of the valley, through rougher country that cost the back east moneymen a fortune to blast and grade, and a hell of a lot less headache in court. Turned out to be the kind of cold arithmetic even railroad barons eventually learn. None of it moved fast. Law never does. But it moved, and that's what counted. Talia stayed a full week, worked shoulder to shoulder with Amos patching the north fence where Hale's boys had torn it climbing over. Same steady, no-rush skill she brought to everything. Amos, who didn't hand out praise like pocket change, pulled Caleb aside one evening and said low that she was the finest natural hand with wire and post he'd stood beside in 30 years on ranches. High words from a man who'd seen plenty. On the 7th dawn, her uncle crested the east ridge with 6 riders behind him. Talia walked to the gate to tell Caleb she was leaving. "My grandmother will want to hear about all this," she said. "Tell her." Caleb paused, searching for the right words. Sentiment never came easy to him. Eliza had always carried that load better. "Tell her thank you," he said, "for what she started at that rock." Talia met his eyes, reached inside her dress and brought out something small. A single blue bead strung on a worn cord. She set it gentle on the fence post between them. "My grandmother kept the one your wife tied to the cloth. Held it 3 years, said it was time you had it back." Caleb picked it up. Small, sky blue, smoothed by time and touch. He hadn't known Eliza put it there. Hadn't known any of it. He closed his palm around it and felt the real weight. Not the bead itself, but every quiet thing it had gathered since dawn, when a woman he loved had knotted it to a bundle and walked away. "When our people pass through next summer," Talia said, "my grandmother would like to sit by the south fork of the creek. She's wanted to see it up close for a long time." "The gate'll be open," Caleb answered. Talia held his gaze another beat with that careful, measuring look he'd come to recognize over the week. Then she gave one firm nod. Not quick, not offhand, but the kind that seals something solid between 2 people who mean every word. She swung up, turned her horse, and rode the slope to the ridge where her uncle waited. Caleb watched until the riders topped out and vanished, the desert morning folding quiet behind them. He lingered at the gate a while longer. Sun was climbing true now, burning off the early colors, settling into the hard, white blaze of a working day. Out in the north corral, Thunder stood at the fence, head up, staring east the way he had every morning that week. Caleb had noticed, was choosing to take it however he pleased. He opened his hand, looked at the bead one last time, then walked to the house and set it on the kitchen windowsill where the first light struck it square every dawn, a place he'd see it daily, no matter what the day brought. He filled his tin cup from the pot still warm on the stove, black and strong the way he liked it. Stepped out into the yard where the day waited patient and uncomplaining. Fence posts needed straightening. Cattle had to be shifted to fresh graze, and a whole list of chores stretched out ahead. Steady, ordinary work that didn't give a damn about gunshots in the night or maps drawn in red ink. Caleb went at it the same way he always had. One deliberate step after another, eyes on what's right in front of you, no rushing past the moment. Attention sharp, hands sure. All around him, the Gila River Valley rolled out wide and silent under the climbing Arizona sun of 1883. Vast, raw, indifferent in the best way. For the first time in 3 long years, that land felt truly his again. Not just a deed in a drawer or a fence line he'd defended, but his in the deep, bone-level way. Something belongs to the man who knows its every scar and secret, who tends it honest, who chooses, day after hard day, to stay rooted. Eliza had woven that belonging into the place years before he ever noticed. She'd done it quiet, no fanfare. In the small acts she left behind like breadcrumbs, a bundle at the flat rock, a bead tied to cloth. Kindnesses so modest they only showed their true weight after she was gone. He thought again of Talia's words, that folks who love the ground they walk, who care for it straight and true, don't ever really leave. They sink into it the slow way water shapes stone over lifetimes. He pictured the blue bead sitting on the kitchen windowsill, catching the first slant of morning light, glowing soft and steady. Then he turned back to the work. The hammer rang clean against the post, the cattle lowed in the distance. And the day moved on like it always does out here, relentless, real, and somehow right. If this tale settled somewhere deep in your chest, if it stirred something true, drop a like, hit subscribe, and tell us in the comments. What would you have done with that map? Rode hard to town and laid it on the sheriff's desk, or pulled your hat low, kept quiet, and prayed the storm blew past? We want your take. We'll be back soon with another story from this hard, beautiful frontier. Because out here, the land remembers every life that ever crossed it. Every hope, every fight, every quiet goodbye. And there are more tales buried in the red dirt than any of us could ever count.